For the second rerunning, kudos to TNA and its writers for giving me another damn good Impact, which I sat throughout and watched every single part of the show, except for the knockout segment, but I'll get onto that later. And we finally got some good build and some matches announced for the Lockdown pay-per-view, which is going to be happening in about 7 days' time. So it's about damn time they actually did it. Let's get right onto this review. If you have any comments or anything, you know where to put them. The first piece of news we got on this edition of Impact Wrestling was that Dixie Carter wasn't going to be there. And I knew from that point onwards that this was going to be an epic motherfucking show. So we open up this show with MVP and we finally get some decent interaction between Joe and Magnus as they, have some kind of informal promo segment. It seems like they spent so much time trying to build Samoa Joe up that they really haven't had much time to really focus on the history between these two and, just getting these two interacting in the ring. So it's about time these two faced off in the ring and had some kind of segment where they interact with each other. Like I said, this felt like a very informal contract signing. We get the announcement that it will be Joe rules, submission, tap out, or knockout, and then they end up brawling. You know what? I believe this stipulation that they're putting in is complete genius. They are playing it all into Joe's hands, so everyone thinks that Samoa Joe is going to have the upper hand in this, which means when Magnus wins that damn belt again, it will get him way much more heat than what he got right now, because everyone thinks he's going to fucking win, and he's going to come out of there with the belt. That's good in my opinion. Bad Bones versus Samoa Joe happened later on in the night. Samoa Joe pretty much killed him, and I do wonder if this match will actually be the main event of Lockdown. You know what? The Lethal Lockdown match seems to have much more consequence going into it, and that kind of feels like the main event. This doesn't really feel like the main event right now. It doesn't really close many shows, and it's a real shame because I'm really looking forward to seeing these two in this steel cage match, Joe rules, etc. It's just a shame it doesn't feel like a main event. It'll be interesting to see if that main event's Lockdown over the Lethal Lockdown match. I have a feeling the Lethal Lockdown match will be main eventing because, it brings ratings! When the news broke that the Wolves have won the Tag Team Championships over the Bromans at a TNA live event, which is essentially a house show, I must admit I was very skeptical. I was thinking, why wouldn't you do a big title change like this on TV? Maybe it would draw a rating or something. But then I thought to myself, well, TNA's live events really haven't been doing all that well in TNA lately. I mean, you've seen pictures of the audiences from the high school gym house shows they've been doing. They've been joining 100, maybe 200, maybe 300 people, which just isn't very good. So I kind of understand why TNA had a sort of big-ish title change happen on there to try and maybe get some people to go to live events in their area, etc. The old anything that can happen moniker that they put at house shows. There could be title changes at house shows. Therefore, they seem a bit more must-see. So I was a little bit skeptical, but I can completely understand why TNA have done this from a PR standpoint. But I digress. Bad Influence versus the Wolves versus the Bromans in a Who Will Be on Team Rude match. Well, apart from if the Wolves won, then no one will be on Team Rude, and then Team Rude will probably be a little bit screwed. And you know what? For a match that was supposed to get a spot on the biggest match in the company's history, as Bobby Roode put it, you would think that number one, they would show their entrances, and number two, you'd think it would be on a bigger spot on the card apart from after the opener. I'm just saying. So it was to no surprise that by far the best team out of the three won this match. And that was the... I can't say it, guys. It was the Bromans. There we go. I've said it. I'm going to puke in a minute, but I said it. And I know most people will be pissed off that the Bromans won in this real cheap fashion that made them look like a chump tag team and everything. But the bottom line is, Bad Influence's contracts are nearly ending, and you can't really put these two guys whose contracts are nearly ending in a big spot on the card. Didn't stop them doing that to AJ Styles, though, but hopefully they've learned from that, and it kind of seems that way. Plus, the Wolves were in this match, and they're kind of feuding with the Bromans now after they just won the Tag Team Championships, so from a storyline standpoint, it makes perfect sense. Even though they just lost 3-on-1 to Samoa Joe and are a massive fucking joke, and they're in, the biggest fucking match in the company's history, and I just can't keep a straight face right now, so I'm gonna move the fuck on. This James Storm Gunner promo that they had, damn good in my opinion. After everything that happened last week with the big heel turn and James Storm turning on his friend, etc., I really couldn't wait to see this segment, and I really thought that these two brought it. It kind of reminded me, not as much, but it kind of reminded me of that Bobby Roode and James Storm promo before Lockdown in 2012. I thought this was a very good promo segment. I liked how you had James Storm bring up the fact that you only got noticed, due to James Storm and the tag team. Then you had, Gunner was pretty good on the mic in this segment. And, with him being intense and everything, really helps to put this over as a big deal. This, in my opinion, was a very good exchange between these two, which went on their history, etc. And it feels like because of this now, the way this has been done and the way this has been built, it feels like both characters are really being elevated by this. Gunner, because he's involved with James Storm and he's involved in a big spot. And James Storm, because now his character is just a little bit better. It just feels like these two characters are on the up right now. And I can't wait for their match at Lockdown, especially after they had that brawl in the backstage area. You had Gunner saying, no, there's only one way out of the arena. And I'm going to wait for James Storm to come out and have a damn brawl with him. It shows, the number one, that James Storm isn't afraid to fight, which for most heels essentially isn't the way. And it just, again, added more intensity to this feud, which really came at a turning point, at the Impact Wrestling show last week. And I'm really, really looking forward to the match of Lockdown. I also liked the camera shot. They had, the little bit of cage between them two, and then they were sort of cutting promos on each other. I thought that kind of tied into Lockdown quite well, even though I'm not really sure if they meant it that way or not. But like I said, great promo segment, one of the better segments of the night. There was a couple, in my opinion. James Storm and Gunner. This should be a damn good match of Lockdown with a personal rivalry. So earlier on in the night, we had EC3 defeating Doug Williams in very quick fashion. The hometown boy coming back to save the day. And EC3 proved he was probably the bigger man on that day by defeating him in 2 minutes, as I said. And then attacked him post-match just to show his dominance. We get to the Kurt Angle's Hall of Fame induction, which was this big hype segment, on this show. And the Hall of Fame segment itself, was what it was, and I don't really have too much to say about it. Well done, Kurt Angle. If this was shoot, you definitely deserve it. But I was really more interested to see what EC3 was going to be doing in this segment. I must admit, as much as I have respect for Kurt Angle, I just couldn't wait to see what EC3 was going to do, in this segment, even though I kind of knew what the end product was going to be with them two facing off at Lockdown. Really felt like TNA were in troll mode in this segment. You had EC3 coming out and trolling his ass off with that video package with all the speech bubbles saying, I thought you wanted a chair, Kurt, and the imported, this is wrestling chance, and then the I beat Sting and Kurt Angle on the back of his speech he was going to make. EC3 was fucking trolling us. And then they decided to troll us even more by having EC3 announced that Angle is injured and the internet is always correct with these kind of reports and that he should be retired. But the 100% source that is Kurt Angle says he is damn fine and EC3 versus Kurt Angle at Lockdown is on. And it's another match that I can't wait for. It's an established star versus an up-and-coming TNA guy. And like I said, TNA had done another good job, even though it's kind of last minute. The beginning of this feud happened, 3 weeks ago with EC3 attacking Kurt Angle's knee, etc. It feels like another good, mid-card feud for this show, which doesn't involve any titles. It feels like it's been written pretty well for. And this segment, again, was another good segment, which, was kind of serious at the start, but then kind of got funny, and then was serious in the end, which is exactly what it should be. Another good segment by TNA. So we had Lady Tapper and Alpha Female versus Madison Rayne and Velvet Sky, and you know what? I've just seen Paige versus Emma on NXT Arrival, and then this, So it looks like Tigre Uno will be debuting at Lockdown. Is that TJ Perkins' old gimmick? I don't know. You tell me down below. I'm just going to come out and say this, guys. I really must admit I had no idea what to make of Samuel Shaw's promo. And I think that's more to do with the fact that we've never really seen a character in wrestling portrayed this way, or I haven't in particular. So I don't really know whether the work done here was good or whether the work done here was bad. But all I care about is it had my fucking eyes on the TV wondering what the fuck Samuel Shaw was going to do with Chrissy Hemme in the ring. And then when Mr. Anderson come out, you had the creaky bastard chant, which I thought was kind of funny. And then he chokes out Mr. Anderson. It just looked really odd, and it just seemed like the way they were doing it was presented in a way that I'd never really seen before. And when you have new stuff presented to you like that, you can't help but be interested, because it's very hard to sort of create new things like that in wrestling where it seems like everything is done. And you know what? Even though I didn't see too much in Samuel Shaw, let's say when he was on Gut Check, the bottom line is that this is yet another TNA guy right now on the roster that is getting put in a feud with a name and is going to have a match at Lockdown. Another one of these characters that was created by TNA. They look like they're trying to get over. Like I said, maybe Samuel Shaw won't beat Anderson at Lockdown. I'm not really too fussed about that right now. All I care about is it really does feel like TNA are actually trying to make their own stars. I mean, they're trying to make stars out of Gunner, James Storm. EC3 is against Kurt Angle. Samuel Shaw is against Mr. Anderson. Austin Aries is a big motherfucking deal right now in the TNA roster, which I'll get onto next. And you've got all these other TNA talents that it feels like TNA are trying to put the focus on, such as Magnus, Rockstar Spud. It feels like TNA are trying to create their own stars, and it makes this TV show feel a whole lot better. So like I said, TNA were treating Austin Aries like a real big deal on this show, the X Division champion, the guy that is more than likely going to cash in his option C to face whoever is the champion at Destination X this year. And, you had Rude and MVP both in segments where they were trying to get his services for the Team Dixie versus the Team MVP Lethal Lockdown match at Lockdown. And in the main event, we had Bobby Roode versus MVP with Austin Aries in his special guest referee Speedos. Only one person can pull off Speedos being a referee. And no, it's not Shawn Michaels, it's Austin motherfucking Aries. This really wasn't about the match. I wasn't really too focused on the match here, other than the fact that MVP did a job to Bobby Roode, which I thought was pretty good. It was really more about this Austin Aries angle and who he was going to side with, etc. And in the end, he put his allegiance to Team Rude, or Team Dixie, I should say. So it looks like Austin Aries is kind of heel right now, even though he's never really been a face and never really been a heel. He's just kind of, a little bit of both. So it wasn't really necessarily a heel turn or anything. But it's, if you got the Bromans on there, you needed another name, another big talent in TNA to be with Bobby Roode in that Team Dixie versus Team Dixie versus Team MVP match. And I do wonder who will be on Team MVP. I'm guessing we'll find this out next week. Let me know who you think will be in Team MVP down in that comment section below. Now I'm going to move on to my overall thoughts on this Impact Wrestling show. Like I said at the start of this review, this was a damn good Impact in my opinion. Every segment felt like it had a purpose, going forward in TNA or going into the Lockdown. There was a lot of segments on here that I really thought were pretty good, and most of them are promo segments, which kind of says a lot about the whole talking versus wrestling thing, in the wrestling industry and what some people think about that. But like I said, this is a very good edition of Impact Wrestling where you announced a couple of matches for the Lockdown card, even though it's not fully announced going into the Go Home show next week. There's about 4 or 5 maybe 6 matches going into the card, and a lot of them, like Gunner and James Storm. The main event, Samoa Joe versus Magnus, and EC3 versus Angle. All these matches I'm really fucking hyped for. I am, because it's named talents going up against TNA talents, or TNA talents fighting the fuck out of each other in a match, which we don't usually see in TNA. It seems like TNA is really taking a corner. But it seems like the TNA rating, once again, wasn't very good. And whether or not that's due to NXT Arrival, people, NXT is on every Thursday at 2 a.m. in Britain on the WWE Network, I believe. I don't know whether it's because of that. There didn't seem to be any other competition from what I heard in the TV ratings that day. I just hope to God that the product is getting quite good for me right now. I'm enjoying, going back and looking at it at the weekend, etc., and going through it that way. I just hope TNA don't panic. Because you know what TNA are like. Last time this happened, they made this whole big deal about Hogan, and I just hope TNA don't panic and do something, to try and ruin this good trend they've made by making their own stars, and I hope they don't draft back Sting or something like that. I just hope they don't panic. But anyway, leave me your thoughts on this week's edition of Impact Wrestling down in the comment section below. We're once again on the road to Lockdown, and it's looking pretty damn good right now. I probably will be giving you my Lockdown preview next week with my Impact Wrestling review, but we'll see what happens. Thank you very much for watching this video, and goodbye.